Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and joining me we have the greatest legal mind in the Pacific Northwest. It is Professor Aubrey.
Hey!
All right, being the time of year that it is, we wanted to have an episode here where we talk a little bit about horror movies. And instead of having kind of a broad discussion about it, what I wanted to do was actually kind of introduce it to someone that's not really experienced horror before, and that is Professor Aubrey.
That's right. I have not really experienced horror before. I remember going to a sleepover when I was probably in fourth grade, maybe fifth grade. And they had a horror movie on, and the first jump scare, I was like, I gotta go in the other room. I just couldn't deal with it. And nobody in my family really liked horror, so it wasn't a big deal to just totally avoid it for the rest of my life.
Yeah. For me, I put it like this. I mean, I like horror movies kind of like I like country music, in the fact that I have a few that I really, really love. But overall, horror movies don't really speak to me that much because a lot of times horror movies are one of the easier things beginning filmmakers can do to, make a movie. And a lot of times too, those are the easiest ones to. Not only are they the easiest ones to make, they're the ones that people are going to be more likely to spend their disposable income on for a cheap horror movie that maybe they laugh at, or maybe they get a quick jump scare. But a lot of horror movies there's a lot of chaff amongst the wheat, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, as someone, I think this was a really cool idea, which is that we're going to watch some horror movies now around Halloween time. Spooky, spooky, spooky. And that will give me an introduction as like an adult that recognizes that these are just films and I don't have to be scared. It's just happening on the television. I'm going to see how that goes.
Yes, and we're not. What I am not doing is introducing her to the films of Eli Roth or anything like that. I can barely handle that. You definitely could not. And yeah, if you're gonna do something like this with somebody you care about in your life, generally take an assessment of what you think they can handle. Talk to them about what they can handle as well, and also just do your best to look back at the types of films that you like. And I did that, and the one that I came up with that I think is probably a good starter horror movie is Scream. Without having seen it, I'm sure you probably are aware of it. What comes to mind when you think of Scream?
So I think of Scream, and I think of I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then also Scary Movie, those sort of like teenage films. And I think back to like, oh, well, it was like Porky's when I was a teenager. But they're just sort of like provocative, I think, more so than they are scary. But I don't know. But that was just sort of my feeling about those movies. I don't know if I'm right or not, but
I'll put it this way. There is a lot more going on here. The screenwriter, Kevin Williamson, this is his, entryway into movies, essentially. Kevin Williamson later went on to create a show you may have heard of called Dawson's Creek.
I have heard of that. That's my cousin's favorite TV show. It was on when he was like a tween teenager.
Yeah, he went from this to, Dawson's Creek and all that. But this was kind of, he, like a lot of people, saw that while there were some great horror movies in the 80s, a lot of it was nonsense. And what he did here for this movie is kind of make a meta response to it. What I like about it is that in a lot of ways, it makes fun of the bad parts of horror movies. But it is also a great, in this case, it's a horror movie, but it's in a slasher genre. Slasher genre is like Psycho. It's kind of like the type of horror that probably realistically could happen, not like a Hellraiser or, a Nightmare on Elm Street type of deal. It's about the scary bad guy with the weapon that's coming after, and can the damsel in distress, win the day.
Gotcha.
So I think, again, for your sensibilities, I think this is going to be a nice entryway into it. There are definitely some jump scares here. It's directed by Wes Craven, one of the greatest horror directors ever. His big creation, of course, is Freddy Krueger. He did the first Nightmare on Elm Street and did plenty of other films. Great filmmaker, but again, overall, I think you're just really going to enjoy this. It will have its horror elements, it will have its scary elements, but I think the story is fun, and I think with how it has pokes fun at the horror genre, it actually in a lot of ways kind of gave a refresh to that genre as well, because the big after effect of this movie was that there was a renewed interest in horror films, because when you have people that can show you just what can be done with a certain with a genre, you're going to interest people, believe it or not. Shocking, I know.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool. I'm excited to see it and see if it has the same effect on me.
Yes. All right. So right now, as we watch this, we are watching it on Pluto TV on their on-demand section. I know last month it was on HBO Max, so we could have seen it in the past without commercials. But since it is only on Pluto TV and we do not physically own the movie, we will have to watch commercials. But the benefit of Pluto TV as well is that just because there are commercials doesn't mean they edit anything else. It's still the full movie. They're just going to put some commercials in. So, Pluto TV is amazing, and I think mandatory to have if you are a person on a budget, especially.
Because how much is Pluto TV?
Free.
$0?
Exactly. It's I think Viacom really struck a nerve here with Pluto TV, and it's nice to see that other services are kind of beginning to start offering free options, because again, not everybody is going to have the money, one, to be able to pay for every single streaming service out there. Two, there are going to be people that just simply couldn't afford it, period, that you're still, you're still able to make money off of them by providing that entertainment with the commercial option. And three, if there are people that are on the fence about like a particular show, for instance, like if they didn't like Star Trek Picard, guess what? Pluto TV on their Star Trek channel plays episodes of Star Trek Picard with commercials, but they're on there. So you can check it out for free, and then if you like it, subscribe to their service. But it's like a cable box in an app.
Yeah, I think that Hulu with commercials should be free for all those reasons, because it would get people to sign up for Hulu, because I'm thinking of Hulu, because I said, let's get the commercial option, which is only $5 a month, because I was feeling like we were paying too much for all the streaming services. Mm-hmm. So we went down to the commercial version of Hulu, and there's a show on Hulu now that I want to watch, and I'm upset that I have the commercial version, right? So I might pop up just so I can watch that show without commercials and then pop back down again.
And that is definitely the beauty of streaming too. The fact that you do have those options. I mean, like we've flirted momentarily here on some brief occasions with having a service like YouTube TV or something like that. But honestly, I think, having just streaming options is better, because, you're more direct, I guess, in terms of what you're taking in, instead of just having something on in the background that you're just soaking in whatever.
Yeah, you at least have to make an active choice to begin with, right? You can't just turn it on and do nothing. Mm-hmm. So there's at least that element of you're editing it yourself, at least.
Yeah, I mean, even with a Pluto TV option, even though it is directed by channels, you're still being more direct with it, because like if I put on the Price is Right Bob Barker channel, granted, most of the time I'm putting that on for just background noise, but again, I am choosing that. I'm not just saying, let's see what's on NBC.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so what we're going to do then is this. We are going to cut it here to a little musical interlude for you folks, and when we come back, the movie will have been completed, and we will get Professor Aubrey's take on Scream.
Sounds great.
All right, so kick back, relax, enjoy the musical interlude. We are back, and we just wrapped up Scream from 1996, which was directed by the legendary Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson. So, first time watching that movie, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was pretty fun for a horror movie. It wasn't too scary. It wasn't too ridiculous, but it had those ridiculous elements that you look for in a horror movie, like the preteen teen sex is always in there, and there's usually some melodrama about some person who's been murdered in the past. I mean, those all just seem like tropes to me, horror tropes.
Yes. Now, obviously, from this point forward, we will be talking spoilers, but we're talking about a movie that's over 20 years old now. So, if you haven't seen it by now, it's on you at this point. But overall, were you surprised at who the killers ultimately were?
I knew it was going to be the last people who were alive. I thought... Towards the end, I thought it might be her.
Really?
Might be Sydney.
Why is that?
Just because she was the main character, and it seemed like that'd be a good twist. You take your main character that you've been building up all this sympathy for, and then turns out she's a cold-blooded killer. Mm-hmm. I mean, you never really liked those guys. I never really liked either of those guys throughout the whole movie, so... It wasn't that far of a stretch for them to be like weird and psycho, because they were kind of weird and psycho to begin with.
Yeah, and if you do notice, like, going back, it's like the character played by Matthew Lillard, who, hey man, that guy, his girlfriend was played by Rose McGowan in the movie, and like early on in the party scene, she actually was killed off. But I don't know if you noticed at the time, but afterwards, when Randy is given the rules of horror movies, and then the Matthew Lillard guy, again, I don't know his character name, says, I'm going to go out and get a couple of beers. Where were the beers?
In the garage.
Yeah, so if he actually truly did go to get those beers, he would have seen her body. So it kind of gave away that he was involved.
But he doesn't come back.
Yeah, he does.
He doesn't until they're outside and he comes up on the porch and he's like, they killed my Tatum.
But it's one again. It's one of those deals, though, that knowing his involvement in how everything wrapped up in the movie. The fact that he said that should be a major clue.
Well, you only think that because you knew what was happening when you came to that analysis.
Well, still. Anyway, what did you think about Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell in the story? Now, typically, female protagonists in horror movies don't have that much to do. What did you think of her performance?
I thought it was good. It was definitely one note. It wasn't Oscar winning, but, I found it entertaining, and I didn't think the acting was so horrible that I was focused on the acting the whole time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, horror movies, like I mentioned in the first segment, for the most part, are not necessary. They're made more a lot of times for the spooks story be damned. So when you do have a horror movie that ends up having a good story as well, it can definitely get you invested. Now, I agree with you that, yeah, she was definitely filling a trope, that has been played in horror movies for many, many years up to that point and up until this day. But looking back at some of the, at least as far as 1996 goes, some of the previous, Scream Queens, kind of like Nancy from the Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 3, for instance, or Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie from the Halloween movies. Those women, those protagonists in a story were a lot weaker in terms of how they were presented compared to Sydney. So I do like that Sydney had a little more to do with in terms of controlling her experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, the reporter character, Courtney Cox's character, was also a strong female character. She does, use her feminine wiles to manipulate Dewey, and that's not cool. But it was the early 90s, and, we could probably forgive them for that.
Well, that too, and also, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that that happens today too. So, in terms of characters and people, it can happen.
What exactly are you talking about?
Using feminine wiles, as you mentioned.
I mean, I think that happens in the movies all the time.
Yeah.
You think that happens in real life?
Yeah, not as much as guys would like to think, but I mean, I think back like when I worked at a camp and the kids were asleep and the counselors were deciding what movie to watch. The vote came to me, and it was between like Dumb and Dumber and Tombstone, and like one of the female counselors came up like right behind me and like hugged me and goes, "Oh, I hope you picked the right movie," and so. Something like that.
Is that the only time that's happened to you?
That I recall, and it was definitely memorable.
Right. So you act like this is a thing that happens on a regular basis when you, 45 years old, it's happened to you one time in your entire life.
I'm not implying this happens on any sort of a regular basis at all. Anyway. Let's go back to the movie here. As far as any negatives, do you have any critiques of the movie? Now, obviously, being a horror movie, again, we're not comparing this to Citizen Kane. We're not comparing this to, Sense and Sensibility or something like that. A horror movie has to be judged, on its own, I guess. It can't be compared really to anything else. So I'm not asking, like a critique like you would give, some like the Little Women adaptation, for instance.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was just trying to think of something negative, honestly, because it was pretty much what I expected. And I wasn't disappointed. I didn't think that it was a terrible movie. And that was kind of the bar was set pretty low for me on like whether this movie was going to be successful or not. So let me think of what I could offer as a constructive criticism. The ending I thought got a little long. All of the slashing just got a little tiresome there at the end, and I think I would have hurried something, either hurried her finding out who the killers were, or hurry what happened after she found out who the killers were. Like, there was just like too much. It went on a little, like 10 minutes too long.
Definitely agree there. There was too much focus at the end there on Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard's character just being the moody, dark teens of the 90s. At the end there, just all the cliches you could think of instead of just cutting to the chase. Now, I can understand why, as a writer, why they did that, though, because I think more than anything, they probably were trying to present it so that when Gail Weathers, Courtney Cox's character, did show up with the gun there near the end, which kind of set off the final ending there, that it was realistic that she had enough time to get from the van that she crashed in, which was a little distance away, to get back to the house. So again, I don't think it was executed as well as it could have been by any means, but I if anything, I'd have to assume that it was thinking about, if let's be a little realistic in terms of when she appears, because if it was a distance away and then suddenly she appears in what the film shows is a few minutes time, that could somewhat take you out of it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. By that time, I think I had grown so tired of it that I had lost the thread of what the fuck was going on anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
Not that I think it was a bad movie. I'm just saying that, it really did get tiresome at the end.
No, I agree. The third act, the antagonist monologue scene did go a little too long. They definitely could have cut that down. I do agree there. Overall, now, do you think is this enough that you would see Scream 2, or has this satiated you to the world of Scream?
I think I'm satiated, and I wonder, can you see I'm feeling some connection or similarities between this movie Scream and Heathers. I think because of the betrayals. So it's not only horror, but there's this series of betrayals that happen between friends. And that's probably what reminds me of Heathers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of a connection, but honestly, there are enough similarities between the two movies that I would not be shocked if there wasn't one, in terms of Kevin Williamson being a fan of that movie. So I don't know, but I'd have to say more than likely any comparisons that you saw were probably intentional.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Heathers is definitely. I don't know if Heathers. Yeah, Heathers is, I've seen normally categorized as a dark comedy, but I know there's murder going on in there, and I think if it was made after Scream, they probably would have emphasized the murder a little more than they did in that movie.
Interesting.
Turn it more into a straight up thing, but so overall, now that this is your introduction to horror, do you think you will be interested in maybe some more, or is this just going to be an experiment for the show?
Well, let's hold our breath, shall we, until I see a few more. I'm definitely willing to go forward with the experiment, so I'm not going to just call a halt to the whole thing now. But I don't know how I'll feel at the end of it.
Yeah, and it ultimately, the horror is the type of genre that you really can't be wishy-washy on. It's not one of those like a romantic comedy is really the type of movie that you can just have on in the background anywhere. There are some movies that can do that, but horror, you have to honestly be deliberate in terms of watching that. That's not the type of movie that's going to be, playing on a television at a dentist office.
Right, absolutely not. And for good reason.
Yes. So, but having said that, like I said at the start here, I do think that, like with any type of genre of entertainment that's out there, even though it may not ever be anything that is your cup of tea, if you do enough digging, you probably you would find something that can speak to you, even if it's just, I enjoyed this 90 minutes. I will never watch it again, but this 90 minutes was not wasted.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right, so I think we'll wrap it up here then. Do you have a letter grade you want to give Scream?
Oh, if I was grading Scream, I would give it a C plus.
Ooh, so it would not lose its financial aid.
No, it would not. It would get to keep its financial aid, and it could keep working to improve itself.
Yes. Myself, I would have to give Scream a solid B.
Really?
Yeah. The story is pretty solid. To be fair, the characters are pretty two-dimensional. I will give you that. But the meta humor of the story it's like the characters are almost aware of the fact that they are the tropes that they are. I mean, like I said, this movie was more than anything kind of poking fun at horror and just poking fun at all the bad tropes too, because I shouldn't say bad tropes, because a trope in and of itself it doesn't necessarily have to be bad. A damsel in distress is a trope, but that doesn't mean it's going to be something that is going to be stereotypical or bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think tropes are inherently bad.
Yeah.
It's descriptive.
Yeah, like Princess Leia in episode 4 was the damsel in distress, but you wouldn't, she was not like, oh, Luke, save me.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so, like we mentioned, we are going to be watching some more overtime here and just doing it the way we're doing now. We'll open with a little brief intro on it, give you a musical interlude, and then give you our thoughts. So, with that, any other thoughts on Scream?
No, I think, people would enjoy it if you put it on Halloween, if you're not doing anything, or if you just have it on in the background. I think it's a good, solid, scary movie.
Which, believe it or not, was its original name.
Scary Movie?
Yes. The Scary Movie franchise ended up taking the name because Scream was named Scream. The first script, the first draft of the script, it was called Scary Movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. All right. So with that, thank you all for listening. Every Wednesday and Saturday in this podcast space, we will have something to entertain your ear holes. Until you hear us again, we bid you adieu.
Good night.
Au revoir.
Farewell.
Okay. We're done.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.